Chapter 7 Masters of Manipulation. If you still feel that cigarettes are pleasurable, consider this. The cigarette industry spends billions of dollars promoting smoking as being enjoyable and sociable. Not millions of dollars, billions. Why? Think about it for a second. If cigarettes really were capable of giving pleasure, why would the tobacco giants need to spend such astronomical sums of money on making your subconscious mind associate cigarettes with pleasure? Of course, the official story is that the cigarette companies are simply competing for market share, but actually this doesn't stand up when illuminated by the facts. There are only a handful of tobacco giants. There's very little genuine competition in the global cigarette market. These guys could save billions and billions of dollars by simply letting people decide whether they want to smoke or not. So, let me ask the question again. Why spend so much? They're spending this money not just to lure millions of new young smokers into the grasp of the nicotine trick, but also to keep existing smokers like you permanently distracted from their real reason for smoking. They want to make sure you die without ever understanding that the real reason you smoked all those cigarettes wasn't pleasure at all, it was fear. Let me embarrass you briefly in order to make a further point. The first time you ever had a real orgasm, it was pleasurable, wasn't it? You didn't need to learn how to enjoy it because the pleasure is real and physical. So, if cigarettes also provide pleasure, why wasn't your first cigarette pleasurable? Do you see what I'm getting at? Even using the most basic logic, it's easy to prove beyond all doubt that smoking isn't driven by pleasure. Let me put it to you another way. When you feel sexually turned on, it's enjoyable and exciting, but only because you know that satisfying it will be pleasurable. But what if you were promised fantastic sex and then forced instead to take a freezing cold shower in dirty water? And what if this humiliation was forced on you 20 times every single day for the rest of your life, and you had to pay a fortune for it, and it was going to ruin your skin, hair, and teeth, and it was going to cause your arteries to harden, and it was going to give you lung cancer, and you were never going to get a single moment of pleasure from it? It would drive you absolutely insane with frustration, wouldn't it? But don't you see? That's the situation you are in. And that's why you're so miserable and confused, because you keep wanting to smoke, even though deep inside you know that cigarettes quite simply don't work. The net result of smoking a cigarette is less than zero. What's the point of reducing physical tension for a few minutes if the only result is to create several more days of identical physical tension? It's like paying £100 for a £5 note. It's like a lifetime of teasing foreplay followed by cold showers. It's an embarrassing, pathetic, demeaning, futile waste of your life. Be honest, when it comes to your affair with cigarettes, who's screwing who? Even when people stop smoking, or more accurately, try to stop smoking, most keep desperately chasing the impossible dream and crawling back to their cigarettes again and again and again, due to some invisible force which they don't understand. In sexual terms, this is exactly the same as repeatedly ending a disappointing relationship, only to go back to it just for the sex, only to then realize that the lousy sex was why you finished it in the first place. You never really finished it at all. All you ever did was throw a tantrum because you felt scared, frustrated, and let down. But by going back, you've forced yourself to end it all over again. And while you're wasting all this time, you could be finding real pleasure somewhere else, anywhere else. Are you beginning to see why your reason for smoking has been so agonizingly difficult to explain until now? Are you also beginning to see why billions of dollars are spent on brainwashing smokers into associating cigarettes with pleasure? Unfortunately, it's an illusion that you've been forced to go along with because you've had no real alternative. Until now, why smoking is a pleasure-free zone. At this point, there may be some stubborn part of your mind still clinging to the idea that your body really does enjoy cigarettes. If so, I've got a confession to make. I envy you. The moment that I finally knew for sure that smoking cannot provide physical pleasure was one of the most amazing moments of my entire life, because that was the moment that the fear and uncertainty finally disappeared. Even without going into all the scientific data about the extremely unpleasant effects of cigarette smoke, let me use a simple piece of logic to prove, one more time, that you cannot possibly smoke for pleasure. Right now, I want you to think of one of your favorite pieces of music and imagine it playing. Now, you obviously get a lot of pleasure and enjoyment from listening to this song. Otherwise, it wouldn't be one of your favorites, would it? But let me ask you 3 simple yes or no questions about the pleasure of listening to your favorite song. If you were told that you couldn't listen to this song for a few days, would it cause you to panic or to become anxious? Have you ever felt a desperate need to listen to this song when you were stressed or immediately before a long flight? Would you stand outside in a howling gale looking like an idiot for no other reason than to listen to this song on your iPhone? No, no, and no. Because these actions, familiar to all smokers, aren't based on pleasure. They're based on fear. and this means that the only thing that matters when it comes to escaping from cigarettes is removing the fear, which brings me to the central conclusion of this book, a conclusion that goes against almost all the established wisdom on nicotine and smoking. It's a conclusion that the cigarette industry quietly reached decades ago and which drives much of their advertising and packaging. It's also a conclusion most smokers instinctively know is true as soon as they hear it. The conclusion is this: even though most people insist that smoking is either habit or addiction, it isn't. In fact, your affair with cigarettes is really driven by nothing less than a mild, chemically induced phobia, a phobia which exists because nicotine withdrawal symptoms feel identical to genuine fear. Let me explain this a little further. Most physically addictive drugs are considered to be addictive because they provide two things: a feeling of intense physical pleasure or well-being when they're taken, and terrible withdrawal symptoms when the addict tries to stop. But smoking actually does neither, and yet some mysterious force still makes it impossible to give up. That mysterious force is the phobia triggered by the fake chemical anxiety that is created by smoking a cigarette, and the infuriating time delay that causes your brain to overlook the fact that smoking a cigarette was the direct cause of it. Smoking is a phobia. It's a phobia caused by your body's delayed reaction to nicotine and the fact that it feels identical to genuine fear, which, unbeknown to your conscious mind, triggers a panic reaction, telling you to smoke a cigarette. Here's a statistic that might interest you. Did you know that smokers who describe themselves as nicotine addicts actually suffer worse withdrawal symptoms when they try to stop than those who consider smoking to be merely a habit? This is because the belief in chronic physical addiction reinforces the belief that stopping smoking will be physically painful. This, predictably enough, creates massive fear, which the terrified individual then mistakes for physical withdrawal symptoms, which causes even more fear. This is known as a phobic reaction, essentially a spiraling panic attack. You keep smoking to avoid this happening, to keep it under your control. Your phobia is essentially a fear of fear itself, and deep inside, you've always known this, haven't you? Remember again that your body's delayed stress reaction to nicotine doesn't do any real damage. It's the panic that this sensation causes, the phobic reaction that keeps driving you to light up. As many other books have correctly pointed out, by itself, the feeling of nicotine withdrawal symptoms is an extremely vague sensation, and there is no pain whatsoever. What does the damage is your subconscious mind mistaking this sensation for fear and becoming genuinely terrified, particularly if you can't smoke. If you still find it hard to believe that smoking is a phobia rather than an addiction, do what I did. Find any scientific report on smoking, or even look up the phrase nicotine withdrawal symptoms on an internet search engine. Try Yahoo, Lycos, Google, Mama, any of them. Then compare these symptoms with the symptoms of anxiety. You'll find that they're more than just similar, they're identical. You'll find them listed as nervousness, tremors, irritability, sleeplessness, lack of concentration, loss of appetite, and so on, all of which just happen to be symptoms of severe anxiety, such as that caused by a phobia. What a coincidence. But don't just take my word for it. Take another look at what you've suffered in the past when you tried to stop smoking. Was there any bleeding, itching, hair loss, reduced bone mass, impairment of hearing or vision, or any other physical symptoms of any genuine disease you've ever heard of? No. You were actually suffering nothing more than the effects of fear. But why? Because you triggered your phobia by trying to stop smoking. Now the good news. Once you correct the subconscious misunderstandings that have created this phobia, your subconscious mind will be no more likely to tell you to smoke than it is to make you pour petrol over yourself and set fire to it. It's only been telling you to smoke because of the phobia known as the nicotine trick. Beat the nicotine trick and you've beaten smoking. It's as simple as that. Don't forget, genuine fear or anxiety is made up of two things. The first is the actual threat itself. The second is the physical sensation caused by your response to it. With the delayed reaction caused by nicotine, all you've got is the second part, or more accurately, something that feels like it. There is no actual threat, and this means you don't need to fight it at all, because it doesn't actually mean anything. If you're like most smokers, maybe you believe that withdrawal symptoms and cravings are actually the same thing. Maybe you believe that whenever you have this underlying feeling of tension, it automatically means you'll want a cigarette. This is totally wrong. Millions of non-smokers who work in smoky environments, such as pubs or bars, breathe in a large amount of nicotine just from the secondary smoke. As a result, they wake up each morning with exactly the same feeling of nicotine-induced tension as smokers do. In most cases, they have absolutely no desire to light up. Why not? Because it's not this feeling which causes you to smoke. It's the false connection which exists in your subconscious brain, the fatal misunderstanding which translates this feeling into the desire to smoke. By the time you finish this book, this false connection will no longer exist, so it won't make any difference whether the feeling of tension lasts 3 days or 4 days or 7,000 years, or how weak or strong it is, or anything else. I still eat in restaurants. I still drink in pubs. I regularly encourage smokers to test the nicotine trick in front of me by smoking, which means I still breathe cigarette smoke, which further means I still sometimes wake up with the feeling of tension caused by nicotine. But my subconscious brain now knows precisely what this sensation is and precisely what caused it, so it never triggers the desire to smoke. You need to make your subconscious mind see that the feeling of sensation caused by smoking doesn't need a panic reaction of any kind, because it represents exactly the same level of genuine threat that a puppy represents to the woman with the phobia of dogs. None at all. It's like an alarm that keeps going off by mistake. It's a phobic reaction to the physical sensation caused by your delayed reaction to smoking a cigarette. That's all it is. As soon as your subconscious mind has been put straight on this, it will stop panicking and your core reason for smoking will disappear, whether you want it to or not. But the news gets even better. Imagine that the delayed feeling of tension caused by nicotine lasted 4 months after smoking your last ever cigarette. This would mean that if you were to stop smoking, you'd feel mild physical tension for 4 months. Would this be a major problem? No, because if you're a smoker, you feel this sensation all the time anyway, and you're going to have it for the rest of your life if you keep smoking. But it would mean that after 4 months, you'd be permanently free of it, and your body would finally be capable of relaxing for the first time since you started smoking. It would be a nice situation, don't you think? But get this, the delayed feeling of tension caused by nicotine doesn't take 4 months to disappear. It takes about 4 days. In fact, just 2 days after a person stops smoking, the sensation of physical tension caused by nicotine drops to about the same level that it drops to as the immediate result of smoking a cigarette. But there's a key difference. When you smoke a cigarette, the feeling of tension drops to this level and then immediately starts to rise again. If you don't smoke for 2 days, it drops to this level and then keeps falling until it disappears permanently. This means that even if nicotine withdrawal symptoms were absolute agony, all you'd need to do is stop smoking for just 2 days, and they'd already have fallen lower than they've ever been even while you've been physically smoking a cigarette. You're almost certainly thinking exactly the same as I was when I first discovered how smoking works. It hardly sounds believable, does it? What about all those times you've tried to stop smoking and were still going through hell weeks later? Surely that was your body crying out for a cigarette, wasn't it? No, it wasn't. It was your subconscious mind screaming in alarm because it thought you were trying to throw away your own safety net. It thought you were trying to put yourself in danger. Don't forget that it thinks that smoking is a cure for fear and anxiety. And if it thinks that while you smoke, why wouldn't it think that 3 weeks after you've stopped, or 3 months, or even 3 years? A phobia doesn't disappear just because it's not been triggered for a while. As any psychologist will confirm, it only disappears when your subconscious mind stops seeing danger where it doesn't exist and relaxes. That's how it works. Smoking is a phobia, which means you absolutely cannot stop smoking without the permission of your own subconscious mind, unless you want to put yourself through hell. What's more, you've always instinctively known this. All I've done is put what you already knew into words and explained the simple facts behind why it happens. If you force yourself to stop smoking, you'll be doing the equivalent of our woman with the dog phobia, forcing herself to walk into Battersea Dogs Home. That's what it will feel like each time you can't smoke. But I don't need to tell you this. You already know it. How many times have you panicked when you thought you didn't have any cigarettes left? Why? Pleasure? No. Addiction? No. Habit? No. Smoking is a phobia. Smoking is a vicious cycle driven by an irrational fear of the delayed response to nicotine and the way it pretends to be genuine fear. It's a scratched record that will jump from panic response to panic response for the rest of your life unless you do something about it. This fact may seem terrifying, but you should take comfort from it because it actually means you're faced with a very simple task, a task that I'm going to walk you through step by step a bit later on. You can hide your head in the sand for the rest of your life, but the reality of smoking tobacco hasn't changed since the first cigarette was smoked on this planet, and nothing can make this reality change, ever. The reality of smoking is exactly the same pathetic, panic-stricken mess it always has been and always will be. Have you ever put your mouth round a car exhaust and tried to breathe the fumes straight into your lungs? Of course not. That would be stupid, wouldn't it? Well, I've got news for you. It would make more sense than smoking. At least it's free. You really think that buying a box of 20 rolled-up paper tubes containing tobacco and smoking them one after another makes sense? It doesn't matter whether you put each cigarette into one of those long, elegant holders, or whether you smoke menthol-flavored cigarettes, or whether you use a solid gold lighter to light them, or whether you stand on your head and sing the national anthem of Venezuela each time you smoke.